In Palestine, the Israeli occupation army continues with its indiscriminate attacks against the civilian population in Gaza, killing dozens during the last hours. The United States will present on Monday its priorities at the head of the United Nations Security Council. The body will share as of December, despite its questionable vetoes on key issues such as the Gaza ceasefire. And in Venezuela, the demonstration called by the far-right opposition leader Maria Corina Machado failed after registering an evidently low attendance despite being strongly promoted by international media. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Palestine, the Israeli occupation army continues with its indiscriminate attacks against the civilian population of the Gaza Strip, killing dozens of people during the last hours. Local media reported that several casualties were recorded after fighter jets bombed a house in Jabalia camp, north of Gaza. Another attack targeted a shelter school in the same area, leaving 8 civilians wounded. On Sunday night, another 10 people were killed after the bombing of a house in Beit Lahaya. The genocide perpetrated by Israel continues despite UN Security Council resolutions for an immediate ceasefire and International Court of Justice directives urging measures to prevent genocide and to relieve the appalling humanitarian situation in Gaza. And a news editor for the Al-Aqsa satellite channel, journalist Ibrahim Kanita, was killed after an Israeli quadcopter opened fire on him as he stood in the courtyard of the Baptist Hospital in Gaza City. The Palestinian government media office strongly condemned the attacks, assassinations and targeting of Palestinian journalists by the Israeli occupation, holding it fully responsible for this heinous crime. According to the office, the number of journalists murdered since the beginning of the genocide in the Gaza Strip has reached 191. And in Palestine, the Islamic resistance movement Hamas called for the creation of an international committee to investigate Israel for using banned weapons in Gaza. In a statement, the movement highlighted the horrifying testimonies of citizens and doctors in the north of the coastal enclave, which have been suffering from a massive operation by Israeli forces for almost 2 months, citing cases of attacks with munitions that caused the vaporization of bodies, as said to be a sign of the use of prohibited weapons. In this regard, Hamas called on the international community, especially the United Nations, to form a working group to analyze the issue on the ground and address widespread violations of international law committed against unarmed civilians. Also in Palestine, the Hamas resistance movement conducted military operations against Israeli targets in north of Gaza. In a statement, Hamas detailed that a tank was destroyed in which a group of Zionist soldiers were also killed. Likewise, during another operation north of the Gaza Strip, a fighter shot a rocket at an armored bulldozer operated by an Israeli soldier who died after being hit. Similarly, the Palestinian resistance movement reported that a combined ambush was successfully carried out against Israeli forces and military equipment at the Awad Tower intersection in the Al-Jinaina neighborhood in eastern Gaza. Meanwhile, in Guatemala, different social movements and prominent figures urged the United Nations to comply with resolutions issued in favor of Palestine. Guatemalan groupings assured that those proposals of resolution to the conflict in Gaza have resulted in dead inks due to the fact that Israel continues causing death and suffering to the Palestinian people. 1 year after the declaration of solidarity with Palestine, Guatemala has been the scene of different activities where demonstrators called for an end to the genocide and denounced the direct participation of the United States as the main promoter of the siege in Gaza. In Syria, government forces backed by Russian troops carried out military operations against terrorist groups that have attacked the cities of Aleppo and Idlib for the past 2 days. The Russian Center for Reconciliation in Syria reported that rocket and explosive attacks were launched against the faction's concentration centers, arms depots and command posts, eliminating 320 terrorists and destroying 63 units of equipment. In this context, the troops were deployed to protect the lives of the Syrian people, in addition to preparing a counteroffensive against the terrorists who infiltrated neighborhoods of the city of Aleppo. And the Syrian government cabinet held an extraordinary session to follow up on the situation in the Syrian city of Aleppo following attacks by terrorist groups. During the meeting, the head of the cabinet, Mohammad al-Jalali, instructed to offer all necessary support to the armed forces to ensure victory over terrorism and its sponsors. The operations began last Wednesday, led by armed groups with heavy equipment, drones, and foreign forces attacked rural areas of the country. For its part, the Syrian military command declared that they continue to successfully confront the terrorist attacks while announcing a counteroffensive to free all the territories. In recent days, the Syrian army has eliminated 1,000 terrorists in Aleppo and Idlib. And in Guinea, dozens of people were killed in clashes between fans during a football match. Authorities informed that dissatisfaction with the referee's decisions favoring the home team prompted visitors to initiate violent actions and clashes with the police. As a result, the security teams fired tear gas in order to contain the angry mob and to disperse the crowd. In this context, so far there have not been official reports on the number of casualties. Now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. The United States will present on Monday its priorities at the head of the United Nations Security Council. The body will share as of this month, despite its questionable vetoes on key issues such as the Gaza ceasefire. The U.S. will succeed the United Kingdom and share of the 15-member body just 2 weeks after Washington again used its veto power exclusive to the 5 permanent members on another draft resolution calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The proposal, introduced by Guyana on behalf of the non-permanent members of the body, received 14 votes in favor in the World Stop Peace body. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has warned of a resurgence of chemical weapons that threaten progress towards ending their use on the planet. On the occasion of the World Day of Remembrance for all victims of chemical weapons, the organization's chief urged the global community to speak with one voice and reaffirmed its commitment to the elimination of chemical weapons. Guterres also urged to fulfill the promise of the Pact for the Future, which called for a world free of chemical weapons. Likewise, the Chemical Weapons Convention prohibits the development, production, stockpiling, and use of this menace and mandates the destruction of existing production facilities. Meanwhile, South Africa assumed on Sunday the rotating presidency of the G20 under the theme Solidarity, Equality and Sustainability until November 31st, 2025. The South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said that during this term he will address inequality, which is a major threat to global economic growth. In addition, Ramaphosa expressed his intention to continue the trend set during the Brazilian administration, which focused on social issues, the reform of international institutions, and climate crisis. The recent inclusion of the African Union as a permanent member of the G20 has raised expectations and is seen as an opportunity to defend the continent's interests in this international forum. The ruling Social Democratic Party will have won Romania's parliamentary elections with 26% of the votes, according to initial exit polls after reporting stations closed. The Ultra-Nationalist Alliance for the Union of Romanians would have been in second place with up to 20% of the votes, and in third place the ruling National Liberal Party with around 15%. In this context, analysts had expected a shift to the right in Romania after the unexpected victory of Călin Georgescu in the presidential election a week ago. The recount should ratify the polls, which last week failed because they did not predict Georgescu's victory. And the opposition Social Democratic Alliance has won the early legislative elections in Iceland and could form a government, but would need the support of 2 other political forces, according to the final tally released by the Electoral Authority. With all the votes counted, the Social Democrats have obtained 20.8% ahead of the Conservative Independence Party of the Prime Minister Jarni Benedictson with 19.4% and the Liberal Reform, another opposition force, with 15.8%. The result represents the second electoral defeat of the Independence Party since Iceland separated from Denmark in 1944, a hard blow for the coalition that has governed for the last 70 years. And the Eastern Route pipeline connecting China to Russia initiated its operation on Monday, so experts inform it will be able to transport up to 38 billion cubic meters of natural gas per year. The project has a single pipeline of over 5,000 kilometers. Consequently, it is considered the largest gas pipeline in the country as it extends from the Heihe town to Shanghai. Furthermore, the supply will meet the annual gas needs of over 450 million people in 9 provinces and regions. In addition to its importance for China, the Chinese-Russian gas pipeline showcases the growing energy collaboration with Russia and the strengthening of exports to Asia after the Western sanctions due to the conflict in Ukraine. We now have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, and go away. Welcome back. In Venezuela, the demonstration called by the far-right opposition leader Maria Corina Machado failed after raising a low attendance despite being strongly promoted by international media. In contrast with the mobilizations in defense of peace and in spite of the media strategies employed to promote participation in the social networks, the far-right did not manage to gather people at the point established for the rally. The low attendance demonstrates the lack of interest of their followers in the mobilization, and more specifically, in the Venezuelan far-right figures who have failed to keep their promises, especially that of staying in the country. And the Venezuelan International Tourism Fair close positioning the country as an attractive international destination and promoting economic development.
En paz, es un país seguro.
Venezuela is a country at peace. It is a safe country. And it is a country that, despite unilateral sanctions, is growing and advancing in prosperity. Venezuela is not stopped by anyone, and this must also be said. This is a recognition to our president. It is a recognition to the persistence and courage of a man who, despite immense difficulties, remains strong. He manages to face the sanctions and grows together with his people. So the FTS has achieved several objectives. There is a political objective, which is the recognition of the country. There is an economic objective, which is a country that grows in the midst of difficulties. And there is a human objective, which is the reunion with the people. We see here the representatives of the BRICS. We have Russia here, we have China, and we also have South Africa. The 4 of them represent, almost, half of the population of the world.
Negotiations in South Korea on a treaty to tackle the global plastic pollution crisis failed to reach an agreement and will continue next year. Negotiations in Busan, a port city in South Korea, failed to produce the first legally binding treaty on plastic pollution by the end of 2024. Some plastic-producing countries and oil and gas nations failed to agree on production limits. For any proposal to be included in the treaty, all nations must agree. The world produces more than 400 million tons of new plastic every year, and without a policy change, it could increase as much as 70% by 2040.
We have made significant progress in Busan in our collective effort to address plastic pollution, including its impact on the marine environment. However, our work is far from complete. and we must remain pragmatic as we continue collaborating toward our shared goal.
We have tested the resilience of our planet to its limit. Now is the time for us to push our own limits and honor the trust placed in us. You have the INC Secretariat and my unwavering support to get this done. Thank you.
Torrential rains flooded homes, businesses, and roads on Sunday on the Greek island of Rhodes as Storm Bora lashed the country for a second day. No injuries were reported in Rhodes, but firefighters received dozens of evacuation calls. Flooding swept cars and debris into the town of Lalissos, damaging people's homes and property. On the other hand, 2 men had died on the island of Lemnos as torrential rains and hurricane-force winds had caused flooding. According to the National Meteorological Service, damage has also been reported in Greece's second-largest city, Thessaloniki, on the mainland, as rain and storms are likely to affect most of the country in the coming hours. Meanwhile, in the United States, the first major snowfall of the season is blanketing cities in upstate New York and northwestern Pennsylvania as the hectic holiday travel and shopping weekend comes to an end. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro signed a disaster emergency proclamation on Saturday and said that parts of Erie County in the northwest received nearly 2 feet of snow, with more expected to fall through Monday night. According to authorities, Pennsylvania State Police responded to nearly 200 incidents during the 24-hour period from 6 a.m. Friday to 6 a.m. Saturday. The unnumbing cold and heavy snow could persist into next week and cause hazards in the Great Lakes Plains and Midwest regions. Also in the United States, President Joe Biden pardoned his son, Hunter Biden, for 2 criminal charges related to weapons and tax convictions in Delaware and California. In a statement, President Joe Biden said he had signed a pardon for his son, Hunter, on 2 criminal charges, arguing that they were politically motivated. This decision contradicts the head of state's previous statements that he would not interfere in the U.S. Justice Department's sentencing and would not use the extraordinary powers of the president to benefit members of his family. More than 50,000 people gathered in Cape Town, South Africa as the festive lights switch on event officially began on the first day of December. The theme for this year's event was Cape Town, People of Hope, and crowds gathering in the heart of the city for the annual festive lights switch on. With a history spanning over 5 decades, the city of Cape Town has been illuminating some of its streets with themed lights to usher in the festive season. The festive lights switch on has become a loved tradition, with thousands of families gathering to witness the magical transformation of the city streets into a display of twinkling lights and colorful decorations. And Cuba marks the 68th anniversary of the event that changed the history of the country, the beginning of the guerrilla struggle for definitive liberation of the imperialism, the landing of 82 expeditionaries in the east of the country on the Granma yacht. In the early morning of December 2, 1956, young men led by Fidel Castro disembarked in Las Coloradas, Granma province. The expeditionaries left the port of Tuxpan in Mexico on November 25th aboard the Granma yacht with a capacity for 20 people. However, they managed to bring 82 expeditionaries. The date became the forge of the nascent rebel army. Therefore, it is also celebrated as the Day of the Revolutionary Armed Forces. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.